Lieutenant Sarah Chen pressed her face against the cold window of the transport truck as it rumbled through the gates of Edwards Air Force Base. The California desert stretched endlessly in every direction, broken only by the occasional Joshua tree standing like a sentinel against the pale morning sky. At 24, she was the youngest pilot in her class and one of only 3 women selected for the experimental fighter program. The weight of that distinction felt heavier than her flight gear. The truck jerked to a stop outside a massive hangar where the sound of jet engines echoed off concrete walls. Sarah grabbed her duffel bag and stepped into the blazing desert heat. Other pilots were already gathering around a stern-faced colonel who looked like he could bench press a small aircraft. "Welcome to hell, ladies and gentlemen," Colonel Marcus Hayes announced, his voice cutting through the engine noise. "You're here because someone somewhere thinks you might have what it takes to fly the most advanced fighter aircraft ever built. I'm here to prove them wrong." Sarah felt the familiar flutter in her stomach that came before every challenge. Back in flight school, instructors had questioned whether her slight frame could handle the crushing G-forces that came with modern air combat. At 5'4" and barely 120 pounds, she looked more like a college student than a combat pilot, but looks could be deceiving. "The F-22 Raptor isn't like anything you've flown before," Hayes continued, gesturing toward the sleek aircraft visible through the hangar doors. "It will push your body and mind to limits you didn't know existed. Some of you won't make it through the first week. Others will wash out when we start pulling 8 or 9 GS in combat maneuvers." Captain Rick "Bull" Morrison, a former Navy pilot with arms like tree trunks, snorted softly. "At least some of us won't have to worry about breaking in half," he muttered, just loud enough for Sarah to hear. A few other pilots chuckled. Sarah kept her face neutral, though her jaw tightened slightly. She'd heard variations of this comment throughout her military career. Too small, too weak, too soft. The words had become background noise, like the constant hum of aircraft engines. The first phase of training focused on understanding the F-22's revolutionary systems. Sarah threw herself into studying the technical manuals, memorizing every switch and display until she could navigate the cockpit blindfolded. The aircraft was a marvel of engineering, capable of supersonic flight without afterburners and equipped with stealth technology that made it nearly invisible to enemy radar. During ground school, she consistently scored in the top 5%, but academic excellence meant little if she couldn't handle the physical demands of flying. The real test would come when they started pulling serious G-forces during combat maneuvers. Dr. Elizabeth Wang, the program's chief medical officer, conducted individual evaluations with each pilot. When Sarah entered the medical facility, Dr. Wang looked up from her clipboard with interest. "Lieutenant Chen, your academic scores are impressive," she said, adjusting her glasses. "But I have to ask, have you considered the physical challenges ahead? The F-22 can pull maneuvers that would make a seasoned pilot black out." Sarah had heard this question before, in various forms, from well-meaning instructors and concerned commanding officers. "With respect, ma'am, I've been cleared for fighter training by 3 different flight surgeons. My G-force tolerance tests were within normal parameters." Dr. Wang nodded slowly. "Normal parameters, yes, but we're talking about extreme conditions here. The human body can only take so much stress before it shuts down. Your smaller frame might actually work against you when blood starts pooling in your extremities." The conversation felt familiar, like a recording that kept playing on repeat throughout Sarah's career. She understood the medical concerns were legitimate, but she also knew that determination and proper technique could overcome many physical limitations. That afternoon, she found herself alone in the base gym, working through the conditioning routine designed specifically for fighter pilots. The exercises focused on building core strength and improving circulation, both critical for withstanding high G-forces. As she worked through a series of resistance exercises, Bull Morrison and 2 other pilots entered the gym. "Look at that," Morrison said loud enough to be overheard. "Chen's trying to bulk up before we start the real flying. Maybe if she gains 20 pounds of muscle, she might last 5 minutes in a real dogfight." Lieutenant Jake "Rocket" Peterson laughed. "I heard she passed her G-force tests, but those were probably calibrated for normal flying. Wait until we start pulling 8 GS while pulling hard turns. She'll be unconscious before she knows what hit her." Sarah continued her exercises without acknowledging the comments, but she felt the familiar fire building in her chest. The same fire that had driven her through flight school, through countless doubts and sideways glances from instructors who wondered if she belonged in a cockpit. The first simulator sessions began the following week. Sarah strapped herself into the exact replica of an F-22 cockpit, surrounded by screens and controls that would soon become second nature. The instructor's voice crackled through her headset as the simulation began. "All right, Chen, we're going to start easy. Basic intercept mission, no dramatic maneuvering. Just get used to how this bird handles." The simulated F-22 responded like a dream, smooth and powerful beyond anything she'd experienced. Even in the simulator, she could feel the incredible potential of the aircraft. When the session ended, she felt energized rather than drained. Her simulator scores were consistently excellent, ranking her among the top 3 pilots in the program. But she knew the real test was coming. Soon they would transition from simulators to actual flight training, where G-forces weren't simulated but brutally real. The night before her first F-22 flight, Sarah sat in her small quarters reviewing flight procedures. Her roommate, Lieutenant Amy "Viper" Rodriguez, was one of the other female pilots in the program and had become a close friend. "You nervous about tomorrow?" Rodriguez asked, looking up from her own technical manual. Sarah considered the question. "Excited mostly. I've been working toward this for years." "Morrison's been telling everyone you'll wash out on the first high-G maneuver," Rodriguez said quietly. "He's got a pool going on how long you'll last." The information didn't surprise Sarah, but it stung nonetheless. "Let him talk. Talk is cheap when you're on the ground." Rodriguez smiled. "That's the spirit. Show those idiots what real pilots look like." As Sarah prepared for sleep, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this point. Growing up in a small town outside Seattle, she'd been fascinated by aircraft since childhood. Her father, an airline mechanic, had taken her to air shows where she watched fighter jets perform seemingly impossible maneuvers against the blue sky. "Those pilots are pushing the edge of what humans can do," he'd told her during one show as an F-16 screamed overhead. "It takes incredible skill and courage to master a machine like that." Even then, at age 10, Sarah had known she wanted to fly fighters. The path hadn't been easy. Military academies were just beginning to fully integrate women into combat roles, and fighter training remained a male-dominated field where female pilots faced constant scrutiny. But she'd persevered through each challenge, driven by an unshakable belief that skill mattered more than size or gender. Now she was on the verge of flying the most advanced fighter aircraft in the world, despite the whispers and doubts that followed her. The next morning dawned clear and calm, perfect flying weather. Sarah arrived at the flight line early, going through her pre-flight routine with meticulous care. The F-22 sitting on the tarmac was breathtaking, its angular stealth design making it look like something from a science fiction movie. Chief Master Sergeant Williams, a veteran crew chief with 30 years of experience, helped her with the final equipment checks. "First time in the Raptor?" he asked, his weathered hands expertly checking her harness connections. "Yes, Sergeant. I've been looking forward to this for months." Williams nodded approvingly. "She's a beautiful bird, but demanding. Treat her with respect and she'll take care of you. Try to muscle her around and she'll humble you quick." The advice felt appropriate. Sarah had learned long ago that successful flying came from working with the aircraft, not fighting it. Brute force was rarely the answer in aviation. Her instructor pilot, Major Tom Gunner Davidson, climbed into the rear seat. Davidson was a respected veteran with over 2,000 hours in F-22s and a reputation for being thorough but fair. "All right, Chen, this is your show," he said through the intercom as the engines spooled up. "We'll start with basic handling characteristics, then work up to some moderate G maneuvers. Nothing too dramatic on your first flight." The F-22's engines produced an incredible amount of power, and Sarah felt pressed back into her seat as they accelerated down the runway. The aircraft lifted off smoothly, climbing rapidly into the clear desert sky. For the first 30 minutes, they practiced basic maneuvers. The F-22 handled like a dream, responding instantly to control inputs with precision Sarah had never experienced. The aircraft felt like an extension of her own body, translating thought into action with remarkable efficiency. "Ready to try some G-loading?" Davidson asked. Sarah's heart rate increased slightly. "Ready, sir." Davidson walked her through the proper technique for G-strain maneuvers. the breathing and muscle tension exercises that helped maintain consciousness during high-G turns. Then he demonstrated a moderate 6G turn, and Sarah felt the crushing weight that pressed her deep into her seat. The sensation was intense but manageable. She'd experienced similar forces during training flights in other aircraft, though never quite this sustained. Her vision narrowed slightly around the edges, but her breathing technique kept her alert and focused. "Your turn, Chen. Give me a 5G turn to the right." Sarah pulled back on the stick, feeling the aircraft respond immediately. The G-forces built rapidly, pressing her down with what felt like the weight of several people sitting on her chest. But her training kicked in automatically. She tensed her core muscles and controlled her breathing, maintaining consciousness and control throughout the maneuver. "Nice work," Davidson said with approval in his voice. "Smooth and controlled. Let's try 6GS." The second maneuver was more challenging, and Sarah felt the edges of her vision starting to gray out. But she maintained control, completing the turn precisely as briefed. When they landed an hour later, Sarah felt exhilarated. The F-22 had performed flawlessly, and she'd handled the G-forces without any problems. As she climbed out of the cockpit, she noticed several other pilots watching from the flight line. Morrison approached as she finished her post-flight inspection. "How'd it go, Chen?" Still conscious. Sarah removed her helmet, shaking out her sweat-dampened hair. "Barely broke a sweat, Morrison. How about you? When's your first F-22 flight?" Morrison's expression darkened slightly. "Tomorrow morning. Don't worry, I won't need any special considerations." The comment was clearly intended as a dig, implying that Sarah had received some kind of preferential treatment. She chose not to respond, instead focusing on completing her post-flight paperwork with Davidson. "Solid first flight, Chen," the major said privately. "You handled the aircraft well and showed good G-tolerance. Keep this up and you'll do fine in the program." That evening, Rodriguez found Sarah in the dining hall, picking at a salad while reviewing flight procedures for the next day. "I heard Morrison's been running his mouth about your flight," Rodriguez said, settling into the chair across from her. "Says the instructors went easy on you because you're a woman." Sarah sighed. "Of course he did. I pulled 6GS without any problems, but somehow that's not enough to prove I belong here." "It's never enough for guys like that," Rodriguez said. "They'll always find something to complain about. The only thing that shuts them up is superior performance." Rodriguez was right, and Sarah knew it. She'd spent her entire military career proving herself over and over again, only to face the same doubts and challenges with each new assignment. The pattern was exhausting but predictable. Over the next 2 weeks, the training intensity increased dramatically. Sarah flew nearly every day, practicing increasingly complex maneuvers that pushed both the aircraft and pilot to their limits. She excelled at air-to-air combat scenarios, where her smaller size actually proved advantageous in tight cockpits during extended flights. The real test came during a particularly challenging training mission designed to simulate a multiple-threat environment. Sarah found herself defending against 3 simulated enemy fighters while protecting a high-value target. The scenario required rapid maneuvering at high G-forces, testing both her physical endurance and tactical skills. As the simulated enemy fighters closed in, Sarah rolled the F-22 into a steep diving turn, pulling 7GS to evade a missile shot. The force was crushing, but she maintained consciousness and situational awareness. Using the aircraft's superior technology, she quickly gained an advantageous position and engaged the lead enemy fighter. The engagement lasted 15 minutes of intense maneuvering, with G-forces ranging from 4 to 8GS throughout the fight. When the mission ended, Sarah had successfully eliminated all 3 enemy fighters while protecting her assigned target. Davidson's voice came through the radio with obvious satisfaction. "Outstanding work, Chen. That was textbook fighter employment." When they landed, Sarah felt drained but triumphant. The mission had pushed her to her physical limits, but she'd performed flawlessly under pressure. As she climbed out of the cockpit, she noticed a small crowd of instructors and fellow pilots watching. Colonel Hayes approached with what might have been the beginning of a smile. "Hell of a flight, Chen. Your tactical decisions were spot on, and your G-tolerance was better than most pilots twice your size." The compliment from Hayes carried significant weight. The colonel was notoriously stingy with praise and had washed out several pilots who couldn't meet his demanding standards. Morrison, who had been watching from the flight line, looked less pleased. His own training flights had been adequate but unremarkable, and he'd struggled with some of the higher G-force maneuvers. "Lucky mission," he muttered to Peterson as they walked away. "Wait until she faces real pressure." But Sarah wasn't focused on Morrison's comments. She was thinking about the incredible aircraft she'd just flown and the growing confidence she felt in her ability to master its capabilities. The F-22 was the most sophisticated fighter in the world, and she was proving herself worthy of flying it. That night, she called her father from the base phone. "How's the training going, sweetheart?" he asked, his voice warm with pride. "Better than I hoped," Sarah said honestly. "The aircraft is incredible, and I think I'm holding my own with the other pilots." "I never had any doubt," her father said. "You've got the heart of a fighter pilot, always have. Just keep doing what you're doing." As Sarah hung up the phone, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The challenges ahead would only get more difficult, but she was ready for them. Critics like Morrison could doubt her all they wanted. Her performance in the cockpit would speak louder than their words ever could. 3 months into the F-22 program, Sarah had established herself as one of the top performers in her class. Her test scores ranked consistently in the top 3, and her flying evaluations showed steady improvement across all categories. But success bred new challenges, and the scrutiny she faced seemed to intensify with each achievement. The morning briefing room buzzed with tension as Colonel Hayes announced the next phase of training. "Gentlemen and ladies, you've mastered basic F-22 operations. Now we move into advanced tactical scenarios that simulate real-world combat conditions. The gloves are coming off." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Advanced tactical training meant facing the most demanding situations a fighter pilot could encounter, including extreme G-force maneuvers that pushed human physiology to its breaking point. This was where the program separated true fighter pilots from those who simply looked good on paper. "Your first mission will be a high-threat intercept scenario," Hayes continued, his gaze sweeping across the assembled pilots. "Enemy aircraft will be represented by F-16 Aggressor Squadron pilots who know every trick in the book. They will not go easy on you because you're trainees." The F-16 Aggressor Squadron had a legendary reputation for making training missions as realistic and challenging as possible. Their pilots were experienced veterans who used modified aircraft painted in enemy colors and employed foreign tactics to provide the most authentic training experience possible. "Lieutenant Chen," Hayes said suddenly, causing Sarah to straighten in her chair, "you'll be leading the first intercept mission. 2 enemy aircraft approaching the California coast at high speed, probable hostile intent." Sarah felt the weight of every eye in the room. Being selected to lead the first advanced mission was both an honor and a challenge she couldn't afford to fail. Morrison shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearly unhappy that he hadn't been chosen for the high-profile assignment. "Roger that, sir," Sarah responded crisply. "Rules of engagement. Standard protocols. Identify, warn, and engage if they continue hostile approach. You'll have a wingman. Lieutenant Morrison will fly as your number 2. The assignment of Morrison as her wingman created an interesting dynamic. She would be in command of a pilot who had publicly questioned her abilities, testing both her leadership skills and his willingness to follow orders from someone he considered inferior. After the briefing, Morrison approached her with a carefully neutral expression. "I guess you're the boss on this one, Chen. Try not to get us both killed." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Just follow my lead and stick to standard procedures. We'll be fine." The preparation for the mission took 2 hours of detailed planning. Sarah studied intelligence reports on the simulated enemy aircraft, reviewing their likely tactics and capabilities. The F-16 aggressors would be flying aircraft modified to represent advanced enemy fighters, complete with sophisticated electronic countermeasures designed to challenge the F-22's stealth advantages. Dr. Wang stopped by the flight line during pre-flight preparations, ostensibly to check on routine medical protocols. But Sarah sensed deeper concern in the doctor's questions. "This will be your most demanding flight yet," Dr. Wang said, watching as Sarah performed her cockpit checks. "High-G maneuvering for extended periods plus the stress of combat decision-making. Are you feeling ready?" Sarah paused in her preparations, considering the question seriously. "I've been training for this my entire career, ma'am. I'm as ready as I can be." Dr. Wang nodded but didn't look entirely convinced. Remember, there's no shame in acknowledging physical limitations. Better to call knock it off than to lose consciousness at a critical moment. The comment stung because it highlighted the persistent doubts about her physical capabilities. Sarah had proven herself repeatedly in training, but apparently one successful mission wasn't enough to silence the concerns about her ability to handle extreme conditions. As she strapped into the F-22's cockpit, Sarah felt the familiar pre-mission rush of adrenaline and anticipation. The aircraft around her represented the pinnacle of fighter technology, capable of engaging multiple enemies simultaneously while remaining virtually invisible to their sensors. Morrison's voice crackled through the radio as they taxied toward the runway. Phoenix 1, Phoenix 2 is ready for departure. Sarah had chosen Phoenix as their flight call sign, thinking it appropriate for a mission that could make or break her reputation. Phoenix 2, Phoenix 1 copies. Follow my lead and maintain radio discipline. The takeoff was smooth and powerful, the F-22's thrust vectoring nozzles providing incredible acceleration. As they climbed to their patrol altitude, Sarah ran through the mission parameters one final time. 2 enemy aircraft approaching from the west at 35,000 feet, speed estimated at Mach 1.2. Phoenix Flight Control. Your targets are bearing 270 degrees, 80 miles and closing. Positive identification as hostile fighters. You are cleared to engage. Sarah's training kicked in automatically as she turned toward the intercept course. The F-22's radar system, one of the most sophisticated ever built, quickly locked onto the approaching aircraft. But as they closed the distance, she realized the enemy pilots weren't going to make this easy. Phoenix 1, I'm getting jamming on multiple frequencies, Morrison reported, tension evident in his voice. The enemy aircraft were employing electronic countermeasures designed to confuse the F-22's sensors, turning what should have been a straightforward intercept into a complex tactical puzzle. Sarah switched to backup systems and adjusted her approach accordingly. Phoenix 2 switched to tactical frequency 3 and maintained visual scanning. They're trying to blind us electronically. What happened next tested every aspect of Sarah's training and natural flying ability. The enemy fighters split apart and began aggressive evasive maneuvers, forcing her to choose between targets while avoiding their simulated missile shots. The engagement quickly developed into a high-speed, high-G dogfight that pushed both aircraft and pilots to their limits. Sarah rolled the F-22 into a vertical climb, pulling 6 GS to avoid a simulated missile shot. The crushing force pressed her deep into her seat, but she maintained consciousness and situational awareness. At the top of the climb, she rolled inverted and dove toward one of the enemy fighters, building speed for her own attack. The pursuing enemy pilot was good, very good. He matched her maneuvers turn for turn, forcing her to pull increasingly higher G-loads to maintain an advantage. During one particularly violent maneuver, Sarah pulled 8.5 GS while executing a high-speed reversal that would have incapacitated a less prepared pilot. Morrison's voice came through the radio, strained with the effects of his own high-G maneuvering. Phoenix 1, where are you? I've lost visual contact. Sarah was deep in her own engagement, trading altitude and airspeed with her opponent in a deadly dance that tested both aircraft and pilot. The enemy pilot was pushing her harder than any training scenario she'd experienced, using every trick and tactic to gain an advantage. Phoenix 2, continue your engagement. I'm handling the northern target. For 12 minutes, Sarah found herself in perhaps the most demanding flying of her career. The enemy pilot employed vertical maneuvers, high-speed reversals, and energy management techniques that forced her to pull G-forces ranging from 4 to 9 GS repeatedly. Lesser pilots might have blacked out or become disoriented, but Sarah's training and natural ability allowed her to maintain control throughout the engagement. The breakthrough came when she anticipated the enemy pilot's next move and positioned her aircraft for a perfect shot. Using the F-22's superior technology, she locked onto the target and achieved a simulated kill just as the enemy pilot attempted another evasive maneuver. Phoenix 1, good kill on northern target, the controller announced. Phoenix 2, report status. Morrison had successfully engaged the second enemy aircraft, though his victory had taken significantly longer and required coaching from ground controllers. When both flights returned to base, Sarah felt drained but exhilarated by the successful mission. Colonel Hayes was waiting on the flight line as they shut down, along with several other instructors and pilots. His expression was unreadable as Sarah climbed out of the cockpit, her flight suit soaked with sweat from the intense physical demands of the mission. "Hell of a fight up there, Chen," Hayes said, his voice carrying a note of respect. "I watched the whole thing on data link. That enemy pilot is one of our best, and you handled him like a seasoned veteran." The compliment meant everything coming from Hayes, but Sarah remained focused on the mission debrief. In fighter aviation, successful outcomes mattered less than understanding what had happened and how to improve future performance. The formal debrief lasted 2 hours, with detailed analysis of every aspect of the engagement. Sarah's tactical decisions were dissected and praised, her G-tolerance noted as exceptional, and her aircraft handling described as textbook perfect. Major Davidson, who had observed the mission from the ground, provided the most significant feedback. Lieutenant Chen demonstrated the situational awareness and physical capability we expect from our most experienced pilots. Her performance today was exemplary in every category. Morrison's performance had been adequate but less impressive. He'd struggled with some of the higher G-force maneuvers and had required assistance from controllers to maintain contact with his target. During the debrief, he remained silent when asked for comments. Word of Sarah's exceptional performance spread quickly through the base pilot community. By evening, she found herself the center of attention in the officers' club, with veteran pilots asking detailed questions about the engagement. "I heard you pulled over 8GS during that vertical reversal," said Captain Lisa Torch Williams, a test pilot with extensive F-22 experience. "That's higher than some pilots can handle even with G-suits." Sarah was modest in her response, crediting her training and the aircraft's capabilities. But internally, she felt a growing confidence in her ability to succeed in the program. The doubts and criticisms that had followed her seemed less relevant after demonstrating superior performance under pressure. Dr. Wang approached her later that evening with what appeared to be genuine surprise. "I've reviewed your physiological data from today's flight. Your G-tolerance was remarkable, better than 85% of pilots your size and weight. I may have underestimated your capabilities." The admission was significant coming from the medical officer, who had expressed the strongest doubts about Sarah's physical suitability for the program. But Sarah knew that one successful mission wouldn't silence all critics permanently. The following week brought news that would test everyone's abilities on a much larger scale. Colonel Hayes announced that the training squadron would participate in a major military exercise called Desert Thunder, designed to simulate a large-scale air war scenario. "This isn't training anymore," Hayes explained during the briefing. "You'll be flying real missions against experienced adversary pilots using the most sophisticated threat scenarios our military can create. Your performance will be evaluated by senior commanders and could influence your assignments after graduation." Desert Thunder represented the ultimate test for any fighter pilot. The exercise involved hundreds of aircraft from multiple services, creating a complex battlefield environment where split-second decisions could mean the difference between victory and defeat. Sarah was assigned to fly air superiority missions, tasked with clearing enemy fighters from designated airspace to protect friendly ground forces. Her wingman would again be Morrison, whose attitude toward her had grown more complex since their first mission together. "I still don't think you should be here," Morrison said privately before their first Desert Thunder mission. "But I'll admit you can fly. Just don't expect me to cut you any slack if things get rough." Sarah appreciated his honesty, even if she didn't like his underlying assumptions. "I wouldn't want it any other way. When we're airborne, just worry about doing your job." The scale of Desert Thunder was immediately apparent during the mission briefing. Sarah found herself in a room with over 50 pilots representing various aircraft types and squadrons. The mission commander, a full colonel with extensive combat experience, outlined a complex scenario involving multiple waves of enemy aircraft attacking from different directions. "The opposition force includes some of the most experienced pilots in our Air Force," the colonel explained. "They'll be using realistic tactics and won't hesitate to exploit any weakness they identify. This is as close to real combat as we can make it." Sarah studied the mission parameters carefully. Her flight would be responsible for establishing air superiority over a critical corridor, engaging any enemy fighters that attempted to penetrate the protected airspace. Intelligence reports suggested they would face superior numbers with approximately equal technology. The night before the first Desert Thunder mission, Sarah sat in her quarters reviewing tactical manuals and trying to calm her pre-mission nerves. Rodriguez stopped by with coffee and moral support. "Big day tomorrow," Rodriguez said, settling into the spare chair. "The whole base is talking about how the trainee pilots will perform against the experienced opposition." Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of expectations. "No pressure, right? Just prove that months of training were worth the investment." Rodriguez smiled. "You've already proven yourself 10 times over. Tomorrow is just another chance to show off." But Sarah knew tomorrow would be different from any training mission she'd flown. Desert Thunder would test not just her individual skills, but her ability to function as part of a larger tactical picture under the most demanding conditions possible. As she prepared for sleep, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought her to this point. Every challenge, every doubt, every criticism had led to this moment where she would finally have the opportunity to prove her worth in realistic combat conditions. The alarm clock seemed to ring only minutes after she'd closed her eyes, but Sarah woke instantly alert and focused. Today would determine whether she truly belonged among the elite pilots qualified to fly the world's most advanced fighter aircraft. Desert Thunder's opening day dawned with the kind of crystal-clear skies that fighter pilots dreamed about. Sarah arrived at the flight line before sunrise, going through her pre-flight routine with the methodical precision that had become second nature. The F-22 sitting on the tarmac represented more than just an aircraft. It was her chance to prove definitively that skill mattered more than size or gender in aerial combat. The mission briefing room was packed with pilots from across the Air Force, their faces reflecting the mixture of excitement and tension that accompanied major exercises. Sarah took her assigned seat near the front, Morrison settling beside her with his usual neutral expression. Colonel Hayes stood before a massive display screen showing the day's tactical scenario. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Desert Thunder. For the next 10 days, you'll face the most sophisticated opposition force our military can assemble. Today's mission involves establishing air superiority over the Los Angeles Basin while protecting critical infrastructure from simulated enemy attack." The scenario was sobering in its realism. Intelligence briefings described a coordinated enemy assault involving multiple waves of fighter aircraft, electronic warfare platforms, and surface-to-air missile systems. Sarah's flight would be part of the first defensive response, tasked with intercepting enemy fighters before they could reach their targets. "The opposition includes pilots from our own aggressor squadrons, visiting international forces, and selected combat veterans," Hayes continued. "They know every capability of your aircraft and will exploit any tactical mistake you make." Sarah studied the threat assessment data scrolling across her tablet. The enemy force was substantial and well-coordinated, using realistic tactics that mirrored potential real-world adversaries. Her flight of 4 F-22s would face at least twice that number of enemy aircraft in the opening engagement. Major Davidson approached her station during the planning phase. "Chen, you'll be leading Alpha Flight today. Choose your wingmen and develop your tactical approach." The assignment to lead a 4-ship flight was both an honor and a tremendous responsibility. Sarah selected Morrison as her wingman, along with Lieutenants Rodriguez and Peterson to complete the formation. The mixed group represented different flying backgrounds and skill levels, requiring careful coordination to be effective. "All right, people, here's how we'll handle this," Sarah began during their flight briefing. "Enemy aircraft will likely approach in multiple waves to overwhelm our defensive systems. We'll use our stealth advantage to position for first shots, then employ vertical tactics to maintain energy advantage." Morrison listened attentively, his earlier skepticism replaced by professional focus. "What about the numbers disadvantage? Intelligence shows at least 8 enemy fighters in the first wave." Sarah had anticipated the question. "We use superior technology and tactics to engage on our terms. The F-22's radar and weapons systems give us significant standoff capability if we employ them correctly." Rodriguez raised her hand. "Rules of engagement. Standard exercise protocols. Simulated weapons only, but treat every engagement as real. The opposition certainly will." As they suited up for the mission, Sarah felt the familiar pre-flight rush of adrenaline mixed with focused concentration. Her G-suit was properly fitted, her helmet communications tested, and her situational awareness already building as she mentally rehearsed the mission profile. The F-22 startup sequence had become routine, but Sarah never lost appreciation for the incredible technology surrounding her. The aircraft systems came online with smooth precision, presenting her with a tactical picture that included friendly and enemy aircraft positions across hundreds of square miles. Alpha Flight Tower, you're cleared for takeoff. Good hunting. The 4 F-22s accelerated down the runway in formation, lifting off into the morning sky with a thunderous roar that echoed off the surrounding mountains. As they climbed to their patrol altitude, Sarah began coordinating with the overall air defense network. Control, Alpha Flight checking in. 4 F-22s mission ready. Alpha Flight Control, proceed to CAP Station Alpha 7. Multiple enemy formations detected approaching from the west. Estimate 20 minutes to intercept. Sarah adjusted course toward their assigned patrol area, maintaining formation discipline while scanning for any sign of the approaching enemy force. The F-22's radar was incredibly powerful, capable of detecting and tracking multiple targets at ranges that gave them significant tactical advantages. Alpha Flight, I have multiple contacts bearing 270 degrees high altitude. Looks like the first wave. The enemy aircraft appeared on Sarah's radar display as a coordinated formation of 8 fighters approaching at high speed. Their tactics were immediately apparent. They intended to penetrate the defensive perimeter through coordinated maneuvering that would force the defending aircraft to split their attention. Alpha Flight split into 2 ship elements. Alpha 1 and 2 take the northern group, Alpha 3 and 4 handle the southern formation. Engage at maximum range. The engagement developed rapidly as both sides maneuvered for advantage. Sarah found herself facing 2 enemy fighters who immediately began aggressive evasive action the moment they detected her radar lock. Their pilots were clearly experienced professionals who understood F-22 capabilities and limitations. What followed was perhaps the most demanding air combat Sarah had ever experienced. The enemy pilots employed every trick they knew, using altitude changes, high-speed turns, and electronic countermeasures to break her radar locks and gain firing positions. Sarah rolled the F-22 into a steep climbing turn, pulling 7 GS to avoid a simulated missile shot. The crushing force pressed her deep into her seat, but her training and conditioning allowed her to maintain consciousness and tactical awareness throughout the maneuver. Alpha 1 defending north, multiple missiles in the air. The simulated battle was intense and chaotic, with aircraft maneuvering violently across thousands of cubic miles of airspace. Sarah found herself pulling G-forces ranging from 4 to 9 GS repeatedly as she attempted to gain advantage over highly skilled opponents. During one particularly violent engagement, she executed a high-speed reversal that subjected her to 8.5 GS while turning inside an enemy fighter's turn radius. Lesser pilots might have lost consciousness or become disoriented, but Sarah maintained perfect aircraft control throughout the maneuver. Fox 2, she called out, indicating a successful simulated missile shot against her primary target. Alpha 1, good kill, the exercise controller confirmed. Northern target eliminated. But the engagement was far from over. Additional enemy aircraft were approaching from multiple directions, and Sarah's flight found itself outnumbered and fighting for survival against increasingly aggressive opposition. Morrison's voice came through the radio, strained with the effects of high-G maneuvering. Alpha 2 defending, I need support. Sarah was already engaged with 2 enemy fighters who were attempting to bracket her aircraft in a coordinated attack. The situation required split-second decision-making and precise aircraft handling to avoid simulated destruction. She pulled the F-22 into a vertical climb, using the aircraft's superior thrust-to-weight ratio to gain altitude advantage. At the top of the maneuver, she rolled inverted and dove toward the nearest enemy fighter, building speed for her attack. The enemy pilot was experienced and skilled, matching her maneuvers with professional competence. But Sarah's combination of superior aircraft performance and exceptional flying ability gradually gave her the advantage she needed. Fox 1, splash 2 enemy aircraft. The simulated kills were confirmed by exercise controllers, but Sarah immediately turned her attention to assisting her wingman. Morrison was being pressed hard by a particularly aggressive enemy pilot who was using advanced tactics to maintain pressure. Sarah approached the engagement from an unexpected angle, using her aircraft's stealth characteristics to remain undetected until she achieved a firing position. The coordinated attack allowed Morrison to escape, while Sarah engaged the enemy fighter in single combat. What followed was a classic dogfight that tested every aspect of her flying skills. The enemy pilot was clearly one of the aggressor squadron's best, using energy management and tactical positioning that pushed Sarah to her absolute limits. For 8 minutes, they traded altitude and airspeed in a deadly dance that covered dozens of square miles. Sarah found herself pulling sustained G-forces that would have incapacitated many pilots, but her exceptional physical conditioning and flying technique allowed her to maintain control. The decisive moment came when she anticipated the enemy pilot's next move and positioned her aircraft for a perfect shot. Using the F-22's superior avionics, she achieved a radar lock and simulated kill just as the enemy pilot attempted another evasive maneuver. Alpha 1, excellent work, the exercise controller announced. Multiple confirmed kills, outstanding tactical employment. When the first mission ended, Sarah's flight had successfully eliminated 8 enemy aircraft while protecting their assigned airspace. Her personal performance included 3 confirmed kills and exceptional leadership under pressure. Colonel Hayes was waiting on the flight line as they shut down, along with several senior officers who had observed the engagement. His expression showed unmistakable satisfaction as Sarah climbed out of her cockpit. "Outstanding flying, Chen," Hayes said, his voice carrying genuine respect. "I've been watching fighter pilots for 20 years, and that was some of the best tactical flying I've ever seen." The compliment carried enormous weight coming from Hayes, but Sarah remained focused on the mission debrief and preparation for subsequent flights. In major exercises like Desert Thunder, success in one mission only earned the right to face even greater challenges. The formal debrief lasted 3 hours, with detailed analysis of every aspect of the engagement. Sarah's tactical decisions were praised by senior observers, her G-tolerance noted as exceptional, and her leadership described as exemplary. "Lieutenant Chen's performance today exceeded every metric we use to evaluate fighter pilots," said Brigadier General Patricia Stone, the exercise director. "Her combination of flying skill, tactical awareness, and physical capability represents the standard we want for all F-22 pilots." Morrison's attitude towards Sarah had clearly evolved throughout the day's missions. During the debrief, he spoke with obvious respect about her leadership and flying ability. "Alpha 1 made decisions that probably saved my life," Morrison admitted during his portion of the debrief. "Her tactical calls were perfect, and her flying was better than pilots with twice her experience." The admission was significant coming from Morrison, who had been one of Sarah's most vocal critics. But the day's combat had demonstrated capabilities that couldn't be argued with or dismissed. Dr. Wang approached Sarah after the debrief with what appeared to be genuine amazement. "I've reviewed your physiological data from today's flights. You sustained G-forces that would incapacitate most pilots while maintaining perfect tactical awareness. I clearly underestimated your physical capabilities." The acknowledgement felt like a major victory, but Sarah knew that Desert Thunder was just beginning. The following days would bring increasingly complex scenarios designed to test every aspect of her abilities as a fighter pilot. That evening, she found herself in the officers' club surrounded by pilots eager to discuss the day's engagements. Veterans with thousands of hours of experience asked detailed questions about her tactics and aircraft handling. "I heard you pulled over 9 GS during that vertical reversal," said Major Jennifer Spike Crawford, a test pilot with extensive F-22 experience. "That's higher than most pilots can sustain even with perfect equipment." Sarah was modest in her responses, crediting her training and the aircraft's capabilities. But internally, she felt a growing confidence that she belonged among the elite pilots qualified to fly the world's most advanced fighter. Rodriguez found her later that evening, reviewing tactical manuals in preparation for the next day's missions. "You've shut up every critic on this base," Rodriguez said with obvious satisfaction. Morrison told half the squadron that you're the best pilot in the program. The transformation in Morrison's attitude was perhaps the most significant validation Sarah could have received. Winning the respect of someone who had openly questioned her abilities meant more than praise from supportive instructors. But Sarah knew that Desert Thunder's most challenging missions were still ahead. Intelligence reports suggested that the opposition would employ increasingly sophisticated tactics as the exercise progressed, testing her abilities in ways that made today's missions look simple. As she prepared for sleep, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. Every challenge, every doubt, every criticism had led to this moment, where she was proving her worth against the best pilots the Air Force could assemble. The phone rang just as she was turning off the lights. Colonel Hayes's voice was crisp and professional. "Chen, I know you're exhausted, but I need to brief you on tomorrow's mission. We're ramping up the difficulty significantly, and I want my best pilot leading the most critical flights." The assignment was both an honor and a tremendous responsibility. Tomorrow would test whether her exceptional performance could be sustained under even greater pressure. "Yes, sir, I'll be ready." As Sarah hung up the phone, she felt a mixture of pride and anticipation. Desert Thunder was proving to be everything she'd hoped for, the ultimate test of her abilities as a fighter pilot. And so far, she was exceeding every expectation. The secure briefing room at Edwards Air Force Base had never felt more serious than it did at 500 hours on the 5th day of Desert Thunder. Sarah arrived to find Colonel Hayes packing in front of a classified display showing real-time intelligence data. The expression on his face immediately told her this wasn't another training scenario. "Chen, close the door and take a seat," Hayes said without preamble. "What I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room until we announce it officially." Sarah secured the door and sat down, her mind racing through possibilities. The intensity of Hayes's demeanor suggested something had changed dramatically since yesterday's successful missions. At 3:47 hours, NORAD detected 12 unidentified aircraft approaching the California coast from the northwest. They're flying in formation at low altitude, using flight profiles consistent with hostile bombers. Current trajectory puts Lowe's Angels directly in their path. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. This wasn't simulation or training. Real aircraft were approaching with apparent hostile intent toward one of America's largest cities. Hayes continued, his voice grave. "Initial attempts at radio contact have failed. The aircraft are maintaining radio silence and have ignored all attempts at identification. F-16s from the 144th Fighter Wing have been scrambled, but their intercept time is 45 minutes. We need F-22s airborne in 20 minutes. Sarah felt her heartbeat accelerate as the implications became clear. After years of training and preparation, she was facing the possibility of actual combat over American territory. "Sir, what's the threat assessment? Are we looking at a genuine attack or some kind of navigation error?" Hayes pulled up additional intelligence displays. Intelligence suggests these could be modified cargo aircraft carrying significant payloads. If they're hostile, they represent a credible threat to civilian population centers. Your mission is to intercept and identify, with authority to engage if they demonstrate hostile intent. The briefing continued for 30 minutes, covering rules of engagement, communication protocols, and coordination with other defense systems. Sarah absorbed every detail while mentally preparing for what could be the most important mission of her career. "You'll be leading a 4-ship flight of F-22s, Hayes explained. "Choose your wingmen carefully, this isn't training anymore." Sarah selected her team without hesitation. Morrison as her wingman, Rodriguez as element leader, and Peterson completing the formation. All had proven themselves during Desert Thunder exercises, and she trusted their abilities under pressure. The flight line was a scene of controlled chaos as ground crews prepared 4 F-22s for immediate launch. Sarah went through her pre-flight checks with mechanical precision, double-checking every system that could affect mission success. Dr. Wang appeared at her aircraft as she completed external inspection. "Sarah, I know I've questioned your capabilities in the past. Right now, I'm grateful we have our best pilot leading this mission." The acknowledgement meant everything coming from the medical officer who had expressed the strongest doubts about her suitability for fighter duty. But Sarah was already focused on the mission ahead, running through engagement scenarios and tactical options. Phoenix Flight Tower, you're cleared for immediate takeoff. Expedite climb to flight level 350. The four F-22s accelerated down the runway with urgent purpose, lifting off into the pre-dawn darkness. As they climbed toward their intercept altitude, Sarah began coordinating with air defense controllers. Control, Phoenix Flight checking in. For F-22s proceeding to intercept unknown aircraft. Phoenix Flight Control. Unknown aircraft now bearing 315 degrees, 120 miles from Los Angeles. Maintain current heading and speed for intercept. Sarah pushed the F-22's throttles forward, increasing speed toward the intercept point. The aircraft responded immediately, its powerful engines producing the thrust needed to close the distance rapidly. Phoenix Flight unknown aircraft have descended to 500 feet altitude and are maintaining course toward Los Angeles. Still no response to radio calls. The low altitude made Sarah's job more difficult, as it suggested the unknown aircraft were deliberately trying to avoid radar detection. Combined with their radio silence, this behavior pattern indicated potential hostile intent. Control, Phoenix 1, request permission to arm weapon systems. Phoenix 1, you are authorized to arm. Rules of engagement are in effect, positive identification required before engaging. Sarah's hands moved automatically through the weapon arming sequence, bringing the F-22's sophisticated combat systems online. The aircraft was now capable of engaging multiple targets simultaneously with beyond-visual range missiles. Phoenix Flight contact. I have 12 large aircraft in formation bearing 320 degrees, 60 miles. Speed 350 knots, altitude 500 feet. The radar contact confirmed intelligence estimates about the size and composition of the unknown formation. 12 aircraft represented a significant threat if they carried hostile payloads toward population centers. Phoenix Flight split into two ship elements. Phoenix 1 and 2 take the lead formation, 3 and 4 handle the trailing aircraft. Maintain visual identification protocols. As they approached the unknown aircraft, Sarah could see them clearly through her helmet-mounted display system. The aircraft were large, twin-engine planes that had been modified with external equipment she couldn't immediately identify. Phoenix 1 attempting radio contact with unknown aircraft, Sarah transmitted on multiple emergency frequencies. Unknown aircraft, this is United States Air Force. You are approaching restricted airspace. Identify yourself immediately and change course. The radio remained silent. The unknown aircraft continued their approach toward Los Angeles without any acknowledgement of her warnings. Control, Phoenix 1. Unknown aircraft are not responding to radio calls and are maintaining course toward populated areas. Request guidance. Phoenix 1, you are authorized to fire warning shots if necessary. Preserve civilian safety as primary objective. Sarah positioned her F-22 directly in front of the lead aircraft, close enough that her presence would be unmistakable to any pilots aboard. She could see figures in the cockpit, but they showed no sign of altering course or attempting communication. Unknown aircraft, this is your final warning. You are approaching restricted airspace over populated areas. Change course immediately or you will be fired upon. Still no response. The unknown aircraft maintained their formation and heading, now only 30 miles from the outskirts of Los Angeles. Phoenix 1, engaging lead aircraft with warning shots. Sarah armed her 20 cannon and fired a burst of rounds across the nose of the lead aircraft. The tracers were clearly visible in the morning light, unmistakably indicating hostile intent if the formation continued. The effect was immediate. The lead aircraft began a sharp turn away from Los Angeles, followed by the rest of the formation. Sarah maintained her intercept position while monitoring for any change in their behavior. Control, unknown aircraft are turning away from populated areas, maintaining intercept to ensure they clear restricted airspace. For 20 minutes, Sarah's flight escorted the unknown aircraft as they flew away from the California coast. Radio calls finally established that they were civilian cargo aircraft that had experienced massive communication system failures during a trans-Pacific flight. Phoenix 1, excellent work, the controller announced. Unknown aircraft have been identified as civilian cargo planes with equipment malfunctions. You are cleared to return to base. The mission ended without shots being fired in anger, but Sarah realized she had just participated in her first real-world intercept of potentially hostile aircraft. The experience was both exhilarating and sobering, demonstrating that years of training could translate into real capability when needed. Colonel Hayes was waiting on the flight line when they landed, along with several senior officers Sarah didn't recognize. His expression showed satisfaction mixed with obvious relief. "Outstanding work, Chen," Hayes said as she climbed out of her cockpit. "You handled a potentially dangerous situation with perfect judgment and tactical skill." One of the unknown officers stepped forward, introducing himself as Brigadier General Michael Torres from Air Combat Command. "Lieutenant Chen, I observed your entire mission from the command center. Your tactical decisions and flying ability were exemplary under extremely demanding conditions." The compliment carried enormous weight coming from such a senior commander, but Sarah remained focused on understanding what had just happened. "Sir, was this a genuine threat or an exercise scenario?" General Torres' expression grew serious. "Those aircraft represented a real potential threat to civilian population centers. Your intercept probably prevented what could have been a catastrophic accident or worse." The revelation that she had just participated in a real-world defense mission felt surreal after months of training scenarios. But her performance under actual pressure had validated everything she'd worked toward throughout her career. Morrison approached as the formal debrief began, his attitude completely transformed from their early training days. "Boss, that was the best flying I've ever seen. You made decisions that probably saved thousands of lives." The admission meant everything coming from someone who had initially questioned her capabilities. But Sarah knew her journey was far from over. This mission had simply proven she belonged among the elite pilots qualified for the world's most demanding flying assignments. Dr. Wang appeared during the post-mission medical evaluation with obvious amazement in her expression. "Sarah, your physiological performance during that intercept was remarkable. You sustained high-G maneuvering for over an hour while maintaining perfect tactical decision-making. I clearly underestimated your capabilities." The medical officer's acknowledgement felt like a major victory, representing final validation from someone who had expressed the strongest doubts about her physical suitability for fighter operations. The formal mission debrief lasted 4 hours, with detailed analysis by senior commanders and intelligence specialists. Sarah's tactical decisions were praised, her flying ability described as exceptional, and her judgment under pressure noted as exemplary. "Lieutenant Chen's performance today represents the standard we want for all fighter pilots," General Torres announced during the debrief. "Her combination of flying skill, tactical awareness, and decision-making ability is exactly what we need in pilots defending American airspace." The praise felt incredible, but Sarah remained focused on continuous improvement and future challenges. One successful real-world mission had proven her capabilities, but she knew maintaining those standards would require constant effort and dedication. That evening, she found herself in an empty briefing room, reviewing the day's events and considering their implications for her career. The transition from training scenarios to real-world operations felt both natural and momentous. Her father called just as she was preparing to leave for dinner. "I heard there was some excitement out there today. Are you okay?" Sarah smiled at the concern in his voice. "I'm fine, Dad. Just did what I've been training for." The news is reporting that Air Force fighters intercepted unknown aircraft approaching Los Angeles. That wouldn't happen to have anything to do with you, would it? Sarah paused, considering how much she could share about classified operations. "Let's just say the training paid off when it mattered." Her father's voice carried obvious pride. "I always knew you had what it takes. Your mother would have been so proud." As Sarah hung up the phone, she felt a profound sense of accomplishment mixed with renewed determination. Today had proven that years of preparation and training could translate into real capability when American civilians needed protection. Colonel Hayes found her in the hallway outside the briefing room, his expression showing something she'd never seen before: genuine respect mixed with fatherly pride. "Chen, I owe you an apology. When you first arrived here, I had serious doubts about whether you could handle the physical and mental demands of F-22 operations. Today, you proved me wrong in the most convincing way possible." The admission from Hayes meant more than any medal or commendation could have. Winning the respect of someone who had questioned her capabilities represented the ultimate validation of her abilities. "Sir, I appreciate that, but I'm just doing what any qualified pilot would do in the same situation." Hayes shook his head. "No, Chen, what you did today was exceptional by any standard. You've earned your place among the elite pilots in American military aviation." As Sarah walked toward her quarters that evening, she reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment. Every challenge, every doubt, every criticism had prepared her for today's mission, where skill and determination had proven more important than size or gender. The phone was ringing as she entered her room. Rodriguez's excited voice came through the speaker. "Sarah, the whole base is talking about today's mission. You're officially a hero." Sarah laughed at her friend's enthusiasm. "I just did my job, Amy, same as any other pilot would have done." "No way. You made decisions under pressure that saved lives. That's what heroes do." As Sarah prepared for sleep that night, she felt a deep satisfaction that came from knowing she had proven herself when it mattered most. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but today had established her credentials as a fighter pilot capable of defending American airspace. The critics and doubters seemed very distant now, their voices drowned out by the reality of exceptional performance under the most demanding conditions possible. She had proven that determination, skill, and courage mattered more than physical size or gender in the cockpit of a modern fighter aircraft. The alarm clock would ring in just a few hours, beginning another day of training and preparation. But tonight, Sarah Chen slept peacefully, knowing she had earned her place among America's elite fighter pilots through demonstrated performance when her country needed her most. 6 months after her successful intercept mission over Los Angeles, Captain Sarah Chen stood at the podium of the Air Force Academy's graduation ceremony, looking out at 200 eager faces of future pilots. The silver bars on her shoulders represented a recent promotion, and the distinguished flying cross on her chest marked her as one of the youngest recipients in Air Force history. "When I first walked into flight training," Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly across the auditorium, "my instructors wondered if I was physically capable of handling the demands of modern fighter aircraft. Some questioned whether someone my size could withstand the extreme forces of air combat." The audience listened intently as she continued. "Those doubts followed me through every phase of training. During my F-22 program, fellow pilots started betting pools on when I would wash out. Medical officers expressed concerns about my ability to handle high-G maneuvering. Even well-meaning mentors suggested I consider transport or tanker aircraft instead." Sarah paused, looking directly at the female cadets in the front rows. "I'm here today to tell you that determination and skill will always overcome physical limitations. The aircraft doesn't care about your size or gender. It responds to competence, courage, and the will to excel." The speech had been requested by the Academy Commandant after news of Sarah's accomplishments spread throughout the Air Force. Her story had become an inspiration for female pilots facing similar challenges and doubts about their capabilities. After her presentation, Sarah was approached by a young cadet whose earnest expression reminded her of herself years earlier. "Ma'am, I'm Jessica Martinez. I want to fly fighters, but my flight surgeon says I might not have the physical strength for air combat. What would you advise?" Sarah considered the question carefully, remembering her own struggles with similar concerns. "Cadet Martinez, the best advice I can give you is to focus on what you can control. Train harder than anyone else, study more thoroughly, and never let doubt creep into your mind. Your physical capabilities are only part of the equation." The conversation continued for several minutes, with Sarah sharing specific training techniques and mental preparation strategies that had helped her succeed. By the time they finished talking, Martinez looked considerably more confident about her future prospects. Colonel Hayes, now promoted and serving as the Academy's commandant, approached as the crowd dispersed. "Excellent speech, Captain. These cadets needed to hear that message." Sarah smiled at her former instructor, whose attitude toward her had evolved dramatically since their first meeting. "Thank you, sir. I hope it helps some of them avoid the doubts I faced." Hayes nodded seriously. "Your story has already changed how we approach pilot selection and training. the emphasis is shifting toward overall capability rather than physical assumptions. The impact of Sarah's success had indeed rippled throughout the Air Force pilot training system. New evaluation criteria focused more on demonstrated performance and less on traditional physical metrics. Female enrollment in fighter training programs had increased by 40% as word spread about her accomplishments. During her visit to the academy, Sarah also met with current flight instructors to discuss training methodology improvements. Her insights about G-force tolerance training and mental preparation were being incorporated into updated curriculum for all pilots. Captain Chen's techniques have improved performance across all demographics, explained Major Patricia Reynolds, the chief flight instructor. Her emphasis on proper breathing and muscle control during high-G maneuvers has reduced unconsciousness incidents by 25%. The statistics represented lives saved and careers preserved, making Sarah's contributions to pilot training as significant as her individual accomplishments. Her methods were now standard curriculum for all students, regardless of their physical characteristics. Following her academy visit, Sarah returned to her current assignment at Langley Air Force Base, where she served as a flight commander in the 1st Fighter Wing. Her squadron flew regular air defense missions protecting the East Coast, and she had quickly established herself as one of their most capable pilots. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez, now Sarah's wingman in the operational squadron, met her at the flight line. "How did the academy visit go? Did you inspire the next generation of female fighter pilots?" Sarah laughed as she began her pre-flight inspection. "I tried to give them realistic encouragement. The challenges haven't disappeared, but at least now there are examples of success to point toward." Their current mission involved a routine air defense patrol, but Sarah never treated any flight as routine. Constant vigilance and professional excellence had become habits that served her well in both training and operational environments. As they climbed toward their patrol altitude, Sarah reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought her to this point. The doubts and criticisms that had once seemed overwhelming now felt like distant memories, replaced by the respect and confidence of her peers. Phoenix Flight Control. Proceed to Patrol Station Alpha 7 and maintain combat air patrol. The familiar call sign brought back memories of her Desert Thunder missions, where she had first proven her capabilities under realistic combat conditions. Those exercises had been the turning point in her career, transforming doubt into respect through demonstrated performance. During their patrol, Sarah noticed an unusual radar contact approaching from the northeast. The aircraft was flying alone at high altitude, following a course that would take it near restricted military airspace. "Control, Phoenix 1. I have a single contact bearing 45 degrees, high altitude, approaching restricted area Romeo 47. Phoenix 1, investigate and identify. Unknown aircraft has not responded to radio calls." Sarah turned toward the intercept course, her training automatically taking over as she approached the unknown aircraft. After her experience over Lowe's Angels, every intercept mission carried the possibility of real significance. "Phoenix 2, maintain position while I investigate the contact." The unknown aircraft turned out to be a civilian business jet that had strayed off course due to navigation equipment problems. Sarah established radio contact and guided them safely away from restricted airspace, but the incident reminded her that operational flying required constant awareness and professional competence. "Nice intercept," Rodriguez commented as they resumed their patrol. "You make it look easy, but I know the decision-making process is incredibly complex." Sarah nodded, appreciating her wingman's understanding of the challenges involved. "Every situation is different. The key is staying calm and following proper procedures while being ready to adapt if circumstances change." Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent transmission from the Air Defense Center. "Phoenix Flight Control. We have reports of a hijacked airliner heading toward Washington, D.C. Proceed immediately to intercept course and establish visual identification." Sarah felt her heartbeat accelerate as she turned toward the new heading. Hijacked aircraft scenarios represented every fighter pilot's most challenging mission, balancing the need to protect ground targets with concern for innocent passengers aboard the threatened aircraft. "Control, Phoenix 1 proceeding to intercept. Request all available information about the hijacked aircraft." Phoenix 1, hijacked aircraft is a Boeing 737 with 150 passengers aboard. Last radio contact indicated armed individuals in the cockpit. Current heading suggests target may be government buildings in Washington. The scenario was every pilot's nightmare, a situation where perfect judgment and flawless execution could mean the difference between protecting innocent lives and preventing catastrophic damage to critical targets. Sarah pushed her F-22 to maximum speed as she closed on the hijacked airliner. Her training and experience had prepared her for exactly this type of mission, but the reality of potentially making life-or-death decisions involving hundreds of innocent people felt overwhelming. Phoenix 1, contact. I have visual on a Boeing 737 bearing 180 degrees, 15 miles. Aircraft appears to be maintaining course toward Washington. Phoenix 1, you are authorized to intercept and assess. Rules of engagement are in effect. Protect civilian populations at all costs. Sarah positioned her F-22 alongside the airliner, close enough to see into the cockpit windows. What she observed immediately told her something was seriously wrong. The cockpit appeared empty, with no visible crew members at the controls. Control, Phoenix 1. I see no one in the cockpit of the target aircraft. This may be a remotely piloted vehicle, or the crew may be incapacitated. The revelation changed the tactical situation dramatically. If the aircraft was being remotely controlled or flying on autopilot toward a target, traditional intercept procedures wouldn't be effective. Phoenix 1, maintain visual contact and stand by for additional instructions. We're coordinating with multiple agencies to determine the best response. For 30 minutes, Sarah flew formation with the hijacked airliner as it continued toward the Washington area. The aircraft maintained straight and level flight, showing no response to her presence or repeated radio calls. The resolution came when explosive ordnance disposal experts determined that the aircraft was unmanned and carrying a significant explosive payload. Sarah received authorization to engage the aircraft with missiles before it could reach populated areas. Phoenix 1, you are cleared to engage target aircraft. Repeat, cleared to engage. Sarah armed her missiles and achieved a radar lock on the hijacked aircraft. The responsibility of destroying an airliner, even an unmanned one, felt enormous as she prepared to fire. Fox 1, she transmitted, launching 2 missiles at the target aircraft. The missiles struck the Boeing 737 with devastating effect, destroying it completely before it could reach any population centers. The explosion was visible for miles, but Sarah knew she had prevented what could have been a catastrophic terrorist attack. Control, Phoenix 1, target destroyed, area is clear. Phoenix 1, excellent work. You have just prevented what intelligence indicates was a major terrorist attack on government buildings. As Sarah and Rodriguez returned to base, the magnitude of what had just occurred began to sink in. She had just participated in her second real-world combat mission, this time preventing a terrorist attack that could have killed thousands of people. Colonel James Mitchell, the wing commander, was waiting on the flight line when they landed. His expression showed both relief and admiration as Sarah climbed out of her cockpit. Captain Chen, you just saved countless lives with your actions today. Intelligence indicates that aircraft was headed for the Capitol building with enough explosives to level several city blocks. The briefing that followed revealed the full scope of the terrorist plot that Sarah's intercept had prevented. The hijacked aircraft had been part of a coordinated attack that could have resulted in massive casualties among government officials and civilians. Captain Chen's quick thinking and perfect execution under extreme pressure prevented what could have been the worst terrorist attack since September 11th, General Torres announced during the classified briefing. Her actions today epitomize everything we want in our fighter pilots. The praise felt incredible, but Sarah remained focused on the importance of constant readiness and professional excellence. Today's mission had proven that operational pilots might face real combat situations with little warning or preparation time. That evening, she called her father to share what she could about the day's events. "Dad, I can't give you details, but today validated everything you taught me about doing your best when it matters most." Her father's voice carried obvious pride. "I always knew you had the heart of a fighter pilot. Your mother would have been so proud to see what you've accomplished." As Sarah prepared for sleep that night, she reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment. From being questioned about her physical capabilities to preventing terrorist attacks, her career had exceeded every expectation and overcome every doubt. The critics and skeptics who had once questioned her suitability for fighter aircraft now pointed to her as an example of what determination and skill could accomplish. Her story had become inspiration for countless other pilots facing similar challenges and doubts. Morrison, now serving in the same squadron, stopped by her office the next morning. "Boss, I owe you another apology. When we first met, I thought you didn't belong in a fighter cockpit. Yesterday proved I was completely wrong about everything." Sarah smiled at her former critic-turned-loyal wingman. "Rick, we all grow and learn. What matters is that we work together effectively when lives are on the line." The conversation reflected how dramatically attitudes had changed throughout the Air Force. Sarah's exceptional performance had forced a reevaluation of assumptions about physical requirements and pilot capabilities that had persisted for decades. 3 months later, Sarah received notification of her selection for promotion to major and assignment as an F-22 squadron commander. At 28, she would become one of the youngest squadron commanders in Air Force history, responsible for training and leading dozens of elite fighter pilots. "Captain Chen, your selection for squadron command is based on exceptional performance and demonstrated leadership under the most demanding conditions," General Torres explained during her promotion ceremony. "You represent the future of Air Force fighter aviation." The assignment represented the ultimate validation of her capabilities, proving that skill and determination could overcome any initial doubts or limitations. From being questioned about her physical suitability to commanding elite fighter squadrons, Sarah's journey had inspired fundamental changes in how the Air Force evaluated and trained pilots. As she prepared to take command of her new squadron, Sarah thought about the young female cadets she had met at the academy. Her success had opened doors for them that might otherwise have remained closed, proving that excellence knew no boundaries of size or gender. The phone rang in her office as she reviewed files on her incoming pilots. Colonel Hayes's voice carried warm congratulation. "Major Chen, I wanted to personally congratulate you on your new command. When you first walked into my program, I had serious doubts about your capabilities. You've proven that the best pilots are defined by their character and skill, not their physical appearance." The acknowledgement from her former doubter felt like the completion of a long journey. Sarah had transformed not just her own career, but the entire Air Force's approach to pilot selection and training. Her story continued to inspire new generations of pilots who faced similar challenges and doubts. The betting pools and whispered criticisms had been replaced by respect and admiration from peers who had witnessed her exceptional performance under the most demanding conditions. Major Sarah Chen's legacy extended far beyond her individual accomplishments, representing a fundamental shift in how military aviation evaluated human potential and capability. Her journey from being ridiculed as too soft for extreme G-forces to preventing terrorist attacks over major American cities had proven that determination, skill, and courage were the only qualifications that truly mattered in the cockpit of a modern fighter aircraft.